What if the foundation of modern medicine was laid not on cadavers, but on the living bodies of the condemned? In the 3rd century BCE, under the rule of the Ptolemies in Hellenistic Egypt, the city of Alexandria became a hub of anatomical research and ethical transgression. Greek physicians Herophilos and Erasistratus, both famed in antiquity for their medical knowledge, conducted experiments that, even by ancient standards, were deeply unsettling. According to multiple historical sources, including the Roman Encyclopedist Celsus, these physicians were permitted by the Ptolemaic kings to perform vivisections, the dissection of living human beings. The subjects were typically condemned criminals, offered not mercy, but the fate of becoming living specimens for anatomical discovery. To cut open the living is more profitable than the dead, Herophilos is reported to have argued, believing that only through direct observation of living organs could one understand their functions. In this practice, the most significant discoveries were not made in laboratories or by examining cadavers, but by slicing open living bodies. These physicians meticulously documented the circulatory, nervous, and digestive systems, distinguishing veins from arteries and even identifying parts of the brain such as the cerebellum. Herophilos is often called the father of anatomy for these achievements. Yet these achievements came at a harrowing cost. The moral boundary between knowledge and cruelty, so often fragile in ancient medicine, was blurred beyond recognition. The subjects were living men and women who, once condemned, were subjected to procedures so invasive that their bodies became mere tools for scientific discovery. While the precise procedures performed during these vivisections remain unclear, historical accounts suggest that the dissections were performed without anesthesia or any form of pain relief. As such, the experiences of the condemned criminals were likely brutal and excruciating. It is almost impossible to imagine a practice like this being tolerated in modern medicine, yet in the ancient world it was seen as a necessary evil, a sacrifice for the greater good of human knowledge. In the pursuit of knowledge, these physicians often performed the vivisections on the nervous system, which was largely unexplored territory at the time. Through direct observation of living bodies, they uncovered the complex network of nerves running throughout the body. One of the most important discoveries was the identification of the brain's role in controlling movement and thought. By examining the brain, Herophilos and Erasistratus made groundbreaking advancements in understanding its function. But the cost was steep, with the victims subjected to horrifying procedures to satisfy the curiosity of their so-called healers. Herophilos is credited with distinguishing between the sensory and motor nerves, laying the foundation for our understanding of the nervous system. He also explored the brain's anatomy, recognizing the importance of the cerebellum in regulating bodily movements. These discoveries were monumental, shaping the course of medicine for centuries to come. Yet, the means through which these discoveries were made raised profound ethical questions. In addition to their work with the nervous system, Herophilos and Erasistratus also performed vivisections on the heart and circulatory system. They made several key observations, such as identifying veins and arteries and understanding how blood circulated through the body. These early breakthroughs formed the basis of modern cardiology and paved the way for later physicians to develop a more accurate understanding of the heart's function. Herophilos, in particular, earned the title Father of Anatomy due to his extensive work in documenting the structure of the human body. But the praise bestowed upon him by later generations of physicians and anatomists overlooks the grisly methods by which his knowledge was gained. In the pursuit of medical advancement, these ancient physicians crossed a line, using the condemned as experiments in ways that would be unimaginable in modern science. And yet, without their daring observations, many of the principles we take for granted in modern medicine may have taken far longer to develop. Their work laid the foundation for the study of anatomy, but it did so at a cost. The condemned men and women who underwent these painful procedures were treated not as human beings, but as mere objects of study. The ethical boundaries between knowledge and cruelty, between healing and harm, were not just tested, they were shattered. The line that separates progress from inhumanity in medicine has always been thin, but in the case of Herophilos and Erasistratus, it seems to have been completely erased. While Herophilos is often celebrated as a pioneer of medical science, the moral implications of his work have been largely overlooked. The practice of vivisection may have advanced our understanding of human anatomy, but it also raises disturbing questions about the lengths to which we are willing to go in the name of knowledge. Is the pursuit of scientific progress worth the suffering of others? Can we justify the use of living human beings as instruments for research? In many ways, the work of Herophilos and Erasistratus set the stage for future medical advancements. The discoveries made through their vivisections would go on to shape the course of medicine for centuries. But the price of those discoveries was steep. The condemned criminals, who had already been sentenced to death, were subjected to unimaginable pain and suffering in the name of knowledge. Their lives were sacrificed on the altar of medical progress. The legacy of Herophilos and Erasistratus is one that cannot be easily reconciled. They made important contributions to the field of medicine, but they did so through methods that, even by ancient standards, were cruel and inhumane. Their work raises questions that continue to resonate today. How far are we willing to go in the pursuit of knowledge, and at what cost? Despite the ethical questions surrounding their methods, the discoveries made by these physicians were groundbreaking. They laid the groundwork for modern medicine and shaped our understanding of human anatomy. However, their work also serves as a reminder of the ethical boundaries that must be respected in the pursuit of scientific progress. Knowledge, while invaluable, should never come at the cost of human dignity and suffering. The legacy of Herophilos and Erasistratus is a haunting reminder that the price of medical advancement is not always measured in the success of a discovery, but in the lives that were lost along the way. In the ancient world, the pursuit of immortality was not limited to the study of the human body, but extended into the mystical and alchemical realms. One of the most infamous cases of this obsession occurred in China under the rule of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who ruled from 221 to 210 BCE. His legacy is immortal, not only through the Great Wall's foundation and the terracotta army guarding his tomb, but also through his relentless search for eternal life. Obsessed with the idea of living forever, the emperor turned to court alchemists who promised longevity through mystical elixirs. Their key ingredient? Mercury. Historical accounts, including those from the records of the Grand Historian, state that the emperor regularly ingested concoctions laced with mercury, believing they would grant divine endurance. Ironically, these very potions may have hastened his death. The emperor's search for immortality was not based in science but in alchemy, a mystical belief system where substances were believed to hold magical powers. Mercury, in particular, was thought to be a key ingredient in these potions. Its toxicity, however, was not understood by ancient alchemists. The emperor consumed mercury-laced elixirs regularly, perhaps believing that the very poison that could kill him would also keep him alive. His vast mausoleum, still unexcavated, is said to contain flowing rivers of mercury, a belief confirmed by modern soil analysis which detected unusually high mercury concentrations near the tomb mound. The emperor's obsession with immortality led him to strange and fatal rituals, and it seems that his search for eternal life ultimately led to his premature death. His quest for longevity reveals a disturbing truth. In some ages, the greatest danger did not come from invaders or enemies, but from medicine itself. The emperor's actions are not unique in the history of rulers' obsessions with immortality. Throughout history, many powerful figures have sought to cheat death through alchemy and mystical remedies, often leading to their undoing. One of the greatest dangers of such pursuits is that they often ignore the natural limitations of the human body in favor of mythical solutions. In the case of Qin Shi Huang, his desire for eternal life was ultimately fulfilled, but not in the way he had hoped. Much like the emperors and nobles of ancient China, European elites in the Middle Ages also pursued dubious medical practices that blurred the lines between science and superstition. One of the most disturbing practices was medicinal cannibalism, in which the remains of ancient Egyptian mummies were ground into powders and used as medicine. This substance, known as mummia, was believed to possess powerful healing properties that could treat ailments ranging from internal bleeding to the plague. The practice was prevalent between the 12th and 17th centuries, as physicians, nobles, and even royalty consumed mummia, believing it would bring about healing. The dried flesh, soaked in resins, was thought to carry powerful properties preserved over centuries. Imported from Egypt and sold by apothecaries, genuine mummy remains were crushed into powders, mixed into tinctures, or added to oils. This practice was based on a combination of superstition and misinformation, driven by the fascination with the mysterious East. Many European scholars believed that ancient Egypt's wisdom had been lost to time, and by consuming mummia, they hoped to tap into this forgotten knowledge. However, this practice was not based in scientific understanding. Instead, it was fueled by an infatuation with mysticism and the hope of immortality through the consumption of ancient remains. Ironically, the ancient Egyptians, who had developed complex embalming rituals to honor the dead, never intended for their mummies to become part of a macabre pharmaceutical tradition. Mummia was not a medicine, but a product of the embalming process, meant to preserve the bodies of the dead for the afterlife. Yet, through misinterpretations and a fascination with the ancient world, Europeans turned these sacred objects into tools for health and longevity. Similar to the fatal desire for immortality that Qin Shi Huang pursued, the Europeans' reliance on mummia was rooted in their desperate need for answers to life's most difficult questions. In many ways, the obsession with immortality drove people to participate in practices that they believed would prolong their lives or enhance their health. But these rituals were not about healing. They were about appeasing the fear of death and defying nature's laws. At the same time, ancient medical practices around the world often pushed the boundaries of what was ethically acceptable. In ancient India and Rome, cataract surgeries were performed using sharp instruments long before the advent of modern ophthalmology. This procedure, known as couching, involved using a sharp object to dislodge the clouded lens of the eye, pushing it downward and out of the visual axis. Surprisingly, this primitive method sometimes worked, and patients regained partial vision. However, the procedure was incredibly risky, as there was no antiseptic, no anesthesia, and no understanding of infection. In ancient Greece, the physician Hippocrates even referred to trepanation, a practice where a hole was drilled into the skull, as a treatment for head injuries. In the Andean region of South America, trepanation reached levels of refinement, with archaeologists discovering skulls that showed signs of bone regeneration after the operation, indicating that patients survived the procedure. While it's difficult to determine exactly how pain was managed during these operations, it's clear that ancient civilizations were willing to experiment with highly invasive medical techniques. The legacy of these early procedures reveals much about humanity's relationship with the body and the mind. Many of these medical practices were performed with limited knowledge of anatomy and without any modern understanding of infection or anesthesia. Yet, despite the risks and the suffering that often resulted, these ancient physicians pushed forward, eager to understand the mysteries of the human body. They were driven by the same thirst for knowledge that has shaped modern medicine, but they did so without the safety nets we take for granted today. Another shocking example of ancient medical practices is found in the Inca Empire, where cranial deformation was practiced as a form of social status. Babies' heads were intentionally shaped through the use of tight wrappings or wooden boards. This practice, known as skull binding, was not done for beauty alone but to signify social standing. Those with elongated skulls were often members of the elite or priestly classes. Though this process may seem barbaric by today's standards, it was a highly ritualized form of identity that tied individuals to their communities and ancestors. These practices, from the vivisections of condemned criminals to the use of mummia and skull deformities, serve as stark reminders of the boundaries crossed in the pursuit of knowledge and immortality. Ancient civilizations were willing to push the limits of human endurance, both physically and ethically, in their quest for understanding. But their legacy is a complex one, revealing the thin line between discovery and cruelty, between healing and harm. History does not simply record these acts. It warns us of the price of knowledge when humanity's thirst for power, immortality, or identity goes unchecked. As the Roman philosopher Cicero once reflected, the diseases of the soul are more dangerous and more numerous than those of the body. The history of medicine teaches us that the greatest danger often lies not in the external threats we face, but in the internal desires that drive us to take extreme actions. In the end, knowledge and power should never come at the cost of human dignity.